my name is Sophie Pope, and I'm a social psychology major at Appalachian State University, and today I'll be talking about treatment versus incarceration of mentally ill convicts. So today about 2 million people with mental health illnesses are sentenced to jail without proper diagnosis and treatment. So, first, I believe that people should be psychologically analyzed if there's, any idea that they would have a severe mental illness that could impair their judgment. Next, I would think that they should be put into a psych ward if it's more appropriate rather than jail so they can get the correct treatment. And overall, government officials are the only ones that can really change this with legislation and moving around funding to actually get more hospital beds so there is room for mental illness patients. So in these pictures, you can see over here, this is a normal healthy brain. And then right here is a brain of a person with schizophrenia. So there's all over a lot less activity, but the main issue is right here in the frontal cortex. There's less than half of the brain activity that a healthy brain would have. So when there's less activity in the frontal cortex, they have a lack of the decisions that they make. So they don't really know what they're doing when they're put in a certain situation. They don't make good decisions because they don't have very much brain activity in the section that helps them make their decisions, making good decisions or bad decisions. So next, this quote talks about how in 1955, there was only one psychiatric bed for every 300 Americans, but in 2005, there was only one bed for every 3,000 Americans, which is getting worse and worse as the years go on because that was 9 years ago. But I think this quote really represents how the United States is still really non-progressive for the mentally ill, but we're turning into more of a progressive society about other issues like gay rights. And so I would think that this would be an issue that could be changed pretty easily with the help of the government, but it's increasingly getting worse. So a counterargument would be that since even though they do have a mental illness, they're still a U.S. citizen, so they should be treated like every other U.S. citizen that does a criminal act, so they should go to jail. But another issue would be funding would have to be taken from other places, maybe like schools or just public areas like parks or roads that need to be fixed. And then this quote right here below talks about how mental illnesses are not actually a primary source of criminal behavior. So if it's not a primary source, it's not really an issue to the government that they see needs to be fixed right away. To go against these, since even though they are U.S. citizens, their brain activity is way different than a normal healthy brain, so they can't actually control what they do most of the time, and there is testing that can tell whether or not they are aware of the decisions they make or if they really cannot control it, and if they were treated, it could actually change how they make decisions, and if they're in certain situations, they may not do a criminal act again. But funding from prisons could be taken since they do right now have more funding than schools. So if there was less people going into prisons, like the mentally ill, they could give some of that funding to hospitals to create new beds to open up more room for them, and it would put less people into prison. And also, it would actually create more funding because less criminal activity would be happening after mental ill patients were actually treated and released, because if they were treated, they could be controlled by medication, actually helping the decisions they make, and they might not do another criminal act again. So at the long run, it would be cheaper for the government to actually fix this. So how can this problem be solved? So before any decisions are made in court about going to jail or to prison, I think the best way would be for them to be psychologically analyzed before and to see if their mental illness actually had a primary reason for, or an effect on the decisions they made, or what, depending on what criminal act they did. And so then the decision could be made in court whether they need to be hospitalized or if it would be okay if they could be treated with medication in prison. So who can change this? The government is the only institution that can make this change. So by moving funding and setting up legislation and laws to put regulations on what kind of treatment the mentally ill get. So I would like to leave you off with this thought. If a prisoner was sick or injured while incarcerated, they would get immediate treatment to help them get better. Then why do millions of people with mental illnesses go without proper treatment in prison for years? Thank you for listening to this. Have a great day.